Several millions of people world over have seen the inside of museums. And several other millions have only ended up seeing the outside of the museums as they pass near the buildings, while several others have no slight idea of what a museum is. For the purpose of maximizing publicity of the museums globally, the International Council of Museums meeting, which was held in Russia on May 18, 1977, declared every 18th day of May as an International Museums Day. The production crew of this documentary caught up with Mr. Flexon Mezinga, who is the Executive Secretary of the National Museums Board, and he now discusses the museums in general.
The general public should appreciate what museums do. Mm-hmm. They should be able to visit museums and learn what is contained in those museums. There is always something to learn. Mm-hmm. Some of them will talk about museums outside, or they will talk about this witchcraft, because they have never been there. Anyone who has gone through the gates of museums and has seen the exhibitions will confess that, yes, there's something to learn. There's always something new that you learn from there. Whether it is economic development, whether it is political, religious beliefs, or beliefs in general, innovation, it is all there. So it is the core upon our people. The Western world had the earliest museums. Of course, we had also countries like Egypt,
yes.
Ethiopia, and Africa. Those had their, what we would call today history. And they have a long representation of human civilization up to this time, going back centuries.
However, the museum professionals from all over the world had been annually meeting from time immemorial. During the 1946 meeting, the museum's leaders gave birth to a global museum institution they named International Council of Museums. Professor Martin Hinz is the current ICOM president, and this is what he had to say during the Zambia's 2014 International Museums Day commemoration.
The International Council of Museums, ICOM, therefore fosters international exchange between museums and museum professionals in order to improve the work of museums worldwide.
Effective 1977, the year when the International Museums Day was declared, every year several commemoratory activities are held globally. In Zambia, the 2015 International Museums Day was not an exception, as the days in the run-up to and after 18th May 2015 were a hive of activity under the theme Museums for a Sustainable Society. With a lot of hard work in the background by ICOM Zambia, way ahead of the day, local and international museum professionals started with a march past from the Lusaka main post office to the Lusaka National Museum, flagged off by the Minister of Chiefs and Traditional Affairs, Dr. Joseph Katema.
Let us march to the museum of sustainable society.
The celebration at the Lusaka National Museum was spiced with various edutainment. In his welcoming remarks, the Lusaka National Museum Director, Dr. Friday Mofuzi, gave a brief background of his institution.
Lusaka National Museum building is part of the main government complex building built through a joint effort of the government of the Republic of Zambia and the People's Republic of China. The project was started in early 1980s. Due to political change in the country in 1991, it was only completed in 1995 and thereafter transferred to the National Museums Board of Zambia. It was meant to house a national political museum to document and preserve the history of Zambia's struggle for independence. The following year, on 25 October 1996, it was officially opened to the public as a national museum specializing in cultural history.
In her remarks, the Committee for Education and Cultural Action, CECA President Professor Emma Nadi outlined the importance of museums.
Museums are the depository of our past. They help us understanding the present. They are powerful tools to think about our future. Who we are, what are we doing, which future we want to give to the new generation. Museums help increasing the consciousness of belonging to the same culture on one hand, and to show the richness of intercultural activities on the other.
In a statement, the Executive Secretary of the National Museums Board, Mr. Flexon Mizinga, had these remarks.
We are trying to blend what we do with cultural aspects, and it's no accident that today we invited their partners, Amayenge, because from their music we have learned that they are really portraying the Zambian culture. They are down to earth, they are portraying what we see in society. And from time to time, I think we will be working with that ensemble. We have been following the activities in Chikuni, and we are impressed with the Chikuni Musical Festival, and we will be working with the Chikuni group, and it's not accident that they are here.
In his official statement, the guest of honor, the Minister of Chiefs and Traditional Affairs, Dr. Joseph Katema, boasted of his government having been there for the Zambian museums.
Since coming into power in 2011, the Patriotic Front government has done everything possible to ensure that museums perform their mandated roles such as research, collection and collection management, public programs such as education and exhibitions that the government of the Republic of Zambia, under the leadership of His Excellency Mr. Edgar Chagwalungu, applauds the National Museums Board and the role the institution mandated with the principal role of managing museums so that they effectively carry out their responsibility of collecting, documenting, preserving, and presenting Zambia's movable heritage for public benefit, for education and enjoyment and establishment.
By the way, it has those spikes, yeah. And for the hunters who hunt this, they do fear the spikes. The spikes, and they can kill a lion, human being, they are very dangerous. But it's also a representation of when you are young, there are a lot of dangers. When you are growing up, there are a lot of things that you need to take care of. Peer pressure, early sex, people want to push you to do something as peers. But you say that it's hard to grow up, but if you persist, you can have
From Lusaka, the local and international museum professionals proceeded to Siavonga for a conference under the 2015 International Museum Day theme Museums for a Sustainable Society, held from 19th to 21st May 2015. 75 delegates drawn from 7 countries, namely Botswana, Switzerland, Italy, Malawi, Tanzania, and Zambia, the host, constituted the conference, which was graced by the Minister of Chiefs and Traditional Affairs, Dr. Joseph Katema. In her welcome remarks, the Committee for Education and Cultural Action CECA Africa Coordinator, Mrs. Victoria Chitungu, emphasized the importance of museum education to museums and highlighted the aim of CECA Africa.
Museum education is important to museums because it forms the face of museums, in that it is the link between museums and the public. This is manifested in educational or public programs, public exhibitions, and visitor interactions.
The CECA President, Professor Emma Nadi, also informed the conference about the tool devised to change the situation in museums globally.
It is a very active international committee. However, it's not so active all over the world. This is why we try to establish an important tool, best practice tool. What is a best practice project, in order to build a common language among so many different people.
In his official speech, the guest of honor, the Minister of Chiefs and Traditional Affairs, Dr. Joseph Katema, urged the African museums to partner with their respective governments.
Design educational programs. Museums have the potential to mobilize and sensitize large numbers of people on pertinent human issues such as health. This is a good example that demonstrates how museums could be used as agents of behavioral and cultural change. Agents and tools that could be used to supplement government efforts. So it is high time that museums in Africa came out of their cocoons of working in isolation and become serious government partners in their efforts to sustainably improve the lives of the African people through, among other things, properly designed education programs. That is, programs that are relevant to the needs of varied and unique audiences that they serve.
In her keynote message on museums for a sustainable society, Professor Emanadi urged the current generation of museum professionals to prepare the next generation of their professional mates by caring for what is in store for their museums.
We must value what we have. We must value what we have, because each country has a lot from the geographical and artistic, economical point of view. We must care for what we have, and this is the duty of museums. Museums have the role of preserving and exhibiting and passing what we have to next generations. A sustainable society is a society that plans the future. Alors, you see exactly the 3 steps that on a little scale we have to apply to our work in museums. This is something important that all museum directors, next generation, we must be proud of what we have.
Professor Nadi's presentation was an opening to various presentations that were made around the theme of the conference, Museum Education Best Practices in Africa, aimed at reminding and educating amongst themselves as participants and professionals. The presentations were also aimed at making African museum professionals gain knowledge in terms of designing public programs that could effectively deliver quality services to their communities. In his presentation, The International Council of Museum Zambian Chapter President Mr. Terry Nyambe revealed that the International Council of Museum is also involved in the fight against illicit trafficking of artifacts and help to preserve museums in times of national and international strife.
ICOM is also committed to the fight of illicit trafficking of cultural objects. There are three tools that ICOM uses. There's the object ID and also red list, and it has the observatory. And the red list are a publication of cultural materials that would be in danger of being looted or stolen. If we have problems like war in a country, ICOM comes in to try and help to save the cultural objects that are at risk of being stolen because of the strife that may be in the country. ICOM was there when trouble was in Haiti. ICOM came down to Egypt when there was problems, Mali, Syria, Iraq, and all those other places that there is some strife.
Under the heading Museums and Guided Tours, a case study of Copperbelt Museum, Ms. Mukangandu Siatontola, who is the Assistant Education Officer for Zambia's Copperbelt Museum, gave a brief background and visitor statistics of the Copperbelt Museum. She outlined some of the important tools Copperbelt Museum uses in educating its public, such as tour guiding, visitor development, visitor engagement and involvement, as well as visitor sustainability, among others.
In order to sustain our visitors at the museum, we focus on the following: to refine and enhance communication with the visitors. We also enhance access to the museum for the visitors. We offer multiple experiences, like I've explained. We also engage visitors on hands-on and minds-on activity. We also establish an active network with the special target groups to make sure that we have networks with our communities.
Of all the challenges which the Copperbelt Museum has, Ms. Siatontola said there is one solution which she named as a way forward.
The way forward for the Copperbelt Museum is to develop and construct a museum of science and technology, which will have a science center, an eco-park, open-air exhibitions. With these educational facilities at the site, we have been given a site as Copperbelt Museum where we have to develop the science and technology museum. So what we are saying is that we can establish ourselves. Already we are small and we need more space. So we can establish ourselves as a center of excellence, providing not only educational experiences, second to none, but entertainment as well. So please, we need your help as we develop the science museum.
In her presentation under the heading Museum Education Best Practices in Africa, a case study of Zambia, Mrs. Yvonne Mlala outlined the importance of education through the museums.
Museum education is by experience through the objects exhibited or stored. We have storerooms in our museums, and also by touching in order to have hands-on experiences. So through different public programs and activities, our visitors and our community at large are able to feel our objects and also have hands-on experiences. And then the aspect of self-interpretation and the touching of the objects gives our visitors a great sense of comprehension to learning and leaves the place with fresh memories of their experiences.
In her presentation, Mrs. Mlala further discussed the program of storytelling being offered by the Lusaka National Museum, where she is an education officer.
How can we use storytelling sustainably, and how can we use it at a national level to spearhead development? Basically, the role of traditional stories in museum education is firstly to appreciate the importance of a clean environment, because from the stories which I've collected, we found that the stories are teaching about how to look after the environment. In the rural communities, there are stories which are told, and these stories talk about conservation methods, such as cutting down of trees to avoid recharge areas, and also to impart knowledge and skills in children and the Zambian community on taking care of the environment. With the use of elderly people who are better depositories of our cultural heritage, the knowledge is passed on from generation to generation, and also to teach the children morals, behaviors on their cultural heritage, and how to live in society.
Ms. Felista Mangalu of Arusha's National History Museum in Tanzania revealed that initially her institution had a problem with attracting young people to the museum, but now they are attracted through their teachers.
As we all might know, that it has been a very big problem in attracting students to get interested in science subjects. So we thought it was a good stage for the teachers to get involved. In our country, it has been a very challenging process to bring students to the museum. And therefore, if you don't have incentive to teachers, it becomes very difficult to bring these young ones to the museum, unless you maybe bring yourself, you go to, make an outreach to the schools. But if you want them to come, you must interest the teachers. Otherwise, they will not plan a program to the museum.
While the trend is for people to follow the artifacts at the museum, in some cases with Botswana National Museum, the situation is vice versa. Mr. Phineas Tendai is the curator in charge of public programs at the institution.
We have the mobile museum program, or what we call the Pitiana Hamomo Twane, which was started in 1979. It was initially funded by UNICEF and the Swedish International Development Agency, with the main target being primary school kids, especially those in rural areas. By this program, we are simply taking the museum to the people. That is why we target rural areas, because it's difficult for them to reach our road. Our facilities are very old as more than 4 decades old, and they need the refurbishment to an extent that even the customers complain of such. They tell you they came 10 years ago, it was the same, it has not been improved.
Like any other museum, Botswana National Museum has its own challenges.
The pull-out of donor funding has affected us a lot, especially the same mobile museum program that we are talking about. It thrived on donor funding, like we mentioned before. But the development of the country to a middle-income economy has led to them believing that we can manage on our own. But you and I know that the story is different on the ground.
The Museums Association of Namibia has not been left out on the education initiatives of attracting youths. Among other notable initiated tools is the formation of the School Clubs and Museum Exhibition Competition, SCAMAX, in 2008. Ms. Gorda Eros represented the Museum Association of Namibia and had this to review about SCAMAX and the challenges.
This is on school clubs, school history clubs specifically. It was initiated by the Museums Association of Namibia in 2008, and it's an annual competition which aims to encourage young people, namely school pupils in high school, to interact more with their museums and with their regions, what's going on, where they come from, to set up exhibitions and go about challenges of display and so forth. And I think it's a really important project, only because it's one where pupils are given the platform to share knowledge with each other, and it focused on intangible cultural heritage, which I think is a really important factor in Namibian youth as well, just because we don't know about each other's cultures and traditions. So the process of SCAMEX is that each school needs to submit a proposal, and only those that are selected will go through to the competition. So the proposals that are submitted need to be of relevance to the theme that is given for that year. Those that are accepted are given a small grant whereby they can use to set up the exhibition and buy the materials for exhibition.
The conference also learned that the Malawian museums have proved to be very instrumental in the fight against HIV. Mr. Aaron Malua of Malawian Museums informed the conference on the role of museums in Malawi with the preservation and promotion of good cultural practices in the fight against HIV.
So what are we doing as a museum where those cultural practices are active? So, and yet we are employed to preserve and promote culture. The question is, which culture? Should we promote the culture that is killing people? Definitely. We need to stand in between to create awareness about these dangerous cultural practices. And this is done through programs. So, realizing that culture is dynamic and not static, the museums of Malawi has developed and continue to implement HIV/AIDS prevention programs that aim at behavioral change. Because the museum is supposed to respond to emerging issues that affect the public. And as we know, the museums all over the world exist not only because of the objects on displays on our storage facilities, but the people that produce the heritage. And the museum is trying to move, or has moved from object-based to human-based. As conserving objects minus man will lead to conserving nothing in future, because it's a man who produces the heritage. So the results of these programs, 2014, we reached 612,891 people. Over 500,000 people reached. And 71% of those reached were tested. 12.1% tested HIV positive. And 4% of them are on treatment and are alive today because of those programs. And by the end of the year, during the World AIDS Day, the government announced that the museums of Malawi is an institution that had reached the highest number of people with its HIV/AIDS public programs. Midway this year, already we have reached 500,000. I'm sure by the end of the year, we'll reach more than 1 million.
On the second day of the conference, Professor Emanadi started with another presentation, but this time discussing the CECA-based practice model in reference to the project preparation. She demonstrated the relationship between museums and education by looking at the ICOM definition of what a museum is.
The idea, the very simple idea behind the best practice project is to pass from what I do every day we cope with educational activities to why and how I can do it. To give an explanation of our actions, our daily activity. So, best practice is a tool to help you explaining to other people why and how you do a project. Public. The public is the purpose of our work. We work for the public. In museums, there are people who make research about the objects. There are people who restore the object. We educators have the mission of communicating to the public. And we need education for that. We transmit education from one generation to the other. This is why museums and education are so close together. Museums pass tangible and intangible heritage to one generation to the others. Education is the same.
Another conference guest was from ICOM Switzerland with a presentation on hospitality and visitor services in museums and heritage institutions. In her presentation, Ms. Gainon Court emphasized the need to treat all visitors in a hospitable manner regardless of why they are in contact with the museum.
Everyone who is coming into the museum, is a public who has to receive the same quality of hospitality. I mean, even if the person comes to bring something to the museum, is not visiting the exhibition, one day he will surely, if he receives a good hospitality quality. So you have to treat anyone with the same approach, same quality of communication when they come into your museum. It's why I say users and visitors, equity of treatments in terms of relations and communications. That's very important. Hospitality means to be in contact with by several ways. It's not only at the reception desk of the museum, but you have to give good quality also when you are in contact with your visitors by email, by telephone, by at the shop, by social media, at the restaurant, anywhere. The visitors may be in contact with the museum even on distance.
Immediately after her presentation on hospitality, Ms. Gainon Court again gave another presentation, but this time on guided tours. She differentiated museum education from that of a school education through advantages and disadvantages.
There is a different approach in museum than in school. The role of the children are not the same. The museum educator is not a teacher. The museum has to give the means to discover, to engage the children to know more, and not on a scholar basis all the time. The expectation of visitors in visit. I mentioned it in my precedent presentation. It's learning and have fun. Learning in a sense to have access to new knowledge, and to have a pleasant and friendly moment, nice climate, unusual, surprising, and captivating visit in a limited duration. Learning in a museum, it's not a large amount of information. It's not to fill the brain of your visitors as much as possible. It's not the way we have to do when we propose guided tours. It's rather a networking of knowledge. The knowledge of the visitor, our knowledge, and how we share that.
In readiness for the visit of the Kariba Dam, Ms. Peggy Himonde gave a presentation on the Kariba Dam history.
The dam was constructed between 1953 and 1958. It was an initiative of the federation existing between the British Rule and the North and Southern Rhodesia, that is Zambia and Zimbabwe. The purpose of the dam was the hydropower generation for the two countries. The construction of the dam came with the benefits and also the effects. About 57,000 to 60,000 total people were displaced and relocated to new places because of the construction of the dam. The name Kariba was driven from Kariva, which means trap in abutment, referred to a huge rock, outcrop that produced water at the entrance of the gorge, adjacent to the opposite construction site.
It was in fact during Ms. Himonde's presentation that the delegates learned of the Trauma Museum's genesis and its activities.
The Gosina mission from German opened a training center for crafts in Snazongwe and a craft shop to empower the local economically. Hence the birth of Trauma Museum and Craft Center, formerly known as Tonga Museum. Up to date, we are the best museum in economic empowerment of the local and the best supplier of the Tonga crafts in the country.
In his official closing statement, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Chiefs and Traditional Affairs, Mr. Michael Kwete, observed that the conference had given guidance on developing educational projects and guiding of visitors in museums. He further assured the delegates of government support in such activities and towards the development of a Museum of Science and Technology on the Copperbelt province.
I want to assure you of the support from the government of Zambia, and in particular my ministry. Colleagues from the Copperbelt Museum have heard your cry. The encouraging thing is you already have land for the proposed Museum of Science and Technology. So I totally agree with you that the space of the existing museum is quite small. So we'll discuss. The SADC delegates, we thank you for being with us. I'm sure you have learned something from this conference just as much as we have. So this will help you do your work better in your respective institutions. It is now my pleasure to declare this conference officially closed.
The official closure was spiced up by the cultural night graced by Muganzubo and Ambayenge cultural ensembles.
Kamwima kamwima
Other than the Kariba Dam war visit, the conference was also punctuated by various edutainment and excursions that, among others, included the dance performances, traditional games, and the boat cruise. However, on their way back from Siavonga to their various destinations, the delegates visited the Ingombe Ilede Historical and Lusitu Fossil Forest sites.
Before, what can you say about this Ingombe Ilede?
It is our heritage. If you don't know about Ingombe Ilede, then you are missing something very important. I would like to urge all the Zambians across this nation. This is a very important historical site in the development of Zambia. This will be called the World Trade Center. Historically, we say this was the best World Trade Center. If you can see those baobab trees, a lot of objects depicting the trade that used to take place can be found there. For those that want to experience a touch of the past, this site is very important. Remember that our heritage is our education. Our heritage is our science, our art, it is our music, it is our everything, it is our business, it is our economy, our identity.
We believe that since this area as a trading post was actually linked to Monomatapa Kingdom, which was growing up which was by the 7th century was actually quite strong in Zimbabwe, and I'm sure we are all aware of the Zimbabwe ruins. It was quite a very big settlement, but that was disturbed by the Portuguese and other foreign influences. So much that probably after the 7th century, the Monomotapa Kingdom actually declined, and probably this links up to the decline of the settlement that was here.
But at the time, if you were up there driving like this, you would think that's a sleeping buffalo. That's how it derived its name. Yes, the locals are still saying, because it was found where the graveyard is, this could be a shrine. 30 people can go in. You saw some people coming out of here. There's a nice hall there, you can go in, and 20 people can fit in there. Why? This is not established, but it's just like a homework for you people. One would start thinking that maybe warriors at the time, when the enemies were coming from maybe across the river, then the local warriors would stay in here to be spying on what the enemy was doing. We never know, But why found at the gravesite? So those are issues connected to this. Now, when we looked at the pottery assemblage, the dating was there. Yes, we dated the site to the 7th century. We looked at the collections there, the pottery. These have connections with Sembazi site, Kalundu, Isampati. All these, when we brought them together, gave us leads like the same people, or rather maybe the ancestors, but we believe, now we generalize it, say those are the same Tonga people who were around this place by the 7th century.
This is Chirundo Fossil Forest, actually where we have got trees which are turned into rocks. Scientific way, when we talk about 150 million years, we believe that during that given period of time, the climate itself, it was very much suitable for these coniferous trees to grow around this given area. Actually, we have got an area of 2 square kilometers which is gazetted as a site. What we have done is that out of the 2 square kilometers which we have just tried to identify some places from locality 1 to locality 6. Where we are here, this is our first locality where we say the standard movement, the first locality. The last locality is across the road, where we have got the most interested part of the site itself. Because there we have got the whole 2 complete tracks. Just from the roots up to the end, they are all rocks. We talk about many types of fossils, but most of them, they come from any living thing. We talk of a shell, maybe animal, even a human being like me, I can be first line.
The 2015 International Museums Week indeed went in the history books as a moment to remember.